The system gave Kale Mori exactly what it promised. 1 cent per kill. Every hunter in the country knew that number. Every hunter in the country looked at it, looked at the insect gates it applied to, and walked away. Because 1 cent is nothing. 1 cent is an insult. 1 cent is the kind of payout that tells you the system doesn't consider what you're killing worth the paperwork. Nobody stopped to ask how many. Kale did. Kale was an F rank with $47 million in debt, a dead father's exterminator license, and an ability the Hunter Association had formally classified as non-combat. He had no guild, no raid party, no backup. What he had was a founding charter that 900 pages deep contained a single sentence nobody in 7 years had bothered to finish reading, and a body that physically burned when a legal clause was worth more than it looked. Everyone else saw a bug in the system's future. Kale saw a gate full of ants and a math problem nobody had solved. 999,999,999 kills later, the association patched the clause. The guilds filed for recovery. The man who stamped Kale's permits with theatrical pity for 2 years submitted a written objection to his S-rank reclassification. It was overruled. This is how an F-rank hunter with a useless ability, 1 cent per confirmed kill, and 999,999,999 ants broke a 7-year-old system and made everyone who laughed at him sign the paperwork admitting it was legal. But to understand why that math mattered, you need to understand the man who ran it. And to understand the man, you need to start 7 years before Gate 44. Before the chemical burns. Before the $9.9 million. Before the association knew his name for anything other than the wrong reasons. Start with the gates. 7 years ago, portals ripped open across every major city on Earth without warning, without pattern, and without explanation. Out of them came monsters ranked by threat level, classified by species, assigned a gate color based on the danger inside. The world had 2 choices: panic or adapt. It adapted. Governments dissolved their military budgets into hunter associations. Scientists abandoned their research programs to study mana. Economists rebuilt entire financial models around essence stone valuations and kill rate projections. Within 3 years, the gate economy was the only economy that mattered. And at the center of it, the hunters. Awakened humans. People whose bodies, for reasons no researcher had fully explained, responded to the gate energy by developing abilities. Combat skills, elemental affinities, spatial powers, perception upgrades. The association tested every registered awakened, assigned them a rank from F through S based on combat output and ability classification, and plugged them into the machine. S ranks earned millions per gate cleared. A ranks lived in penthouses and turned down guild offers for sport. B and C ranks formed the working backbone, steady income, manageable danger, careers that made sense. F ranks were the bottom 3% of awakened hunters. Abilities too weak, too niche, or too strange to translate into combat value. Most of them quit within a year. The ones who stayed did grunt work, carrying supplies for higher-ranked raid parties, clearing vermin infestations in residential areas, and handling the gate types that produced nothing worth selling. Insect gates. The lowest classification in the entire gate economy. No rare essence stones. No high-value monster cores. Minimal mana residue. The payout structure reflected this: 1 cent per confirmed arthropod kill. A rate so low the association hadn't reviewed it since the founding charter was drafted. Why would they? No serious hunter spent time in insect gates. The math didn't work. Kale Mori had been doing the math wrong for 2 years. He was 22, registered F rank, operating out of the Seoul district's lowest traffic gate assignment desk. Height average. Build lean in the way that comes from skipping meals strategically rather than training intentionally. His hunter profile listed 1 ability under the classification column. Det sense, passive, non-combat, formally assessed as 0 raid value. The ability worked like this. When Kale came into contact with any binding document, a contract, a legal clause, a financial agreement, a system-generated payment structure, he felt its weight. Not metaphorically, physically. A pressure in his chest, calibrated precisely to the gap between what a document appeared to be worth on the surface and what it was actually worth if you read every word of it. A standard guild contract felt like nothing. A poorly structured gate permit felt like mild discomfort. The founding charter's payment clause, it would turn out, felt like standing next to an open furnace. The association's assessor who evaluated him at Awakening wrote 3 words in the notes column. Non-combat, no value. Kale had been carrying that assessment in his registration file for 2 years. Every guild recruitment desk he approached, and he had approached 11, pulled up the file, read the classification, and ended the conversation before it started. So he cleared insect gates. Alone. His father had done the same work for 6 years before him. Park Mori, registered F rank, biological hazard certification holder, the kind of hunter the industry produces and immediately forgets. He had spent those 6 years clearing insect and vermin gates across the industrial district, earning enough to keep the family functional and the certification current. The certification cost $28,000 to obtain and $3,400 annually to maintain. A figure that made sense only if you were already inside insect gates regularly enough to offset it, and which served as an impenetrable financial wall for any hunter who hadn't inherited access. 3 years ago, a gate collapsed mid-clear. Standard F-rank insect gate, industrial district, routine assignment. The structural failure was logged as an equipment malfunction in the association's incident report. The compensation payout to Kale's family, $180,000. Standard wrongful death settlement for an F-rank hunter with no guild affiliation and no dependents listed above minimum threshold. Debt Sense had fired the moment Kale signed the compensation paperwork. A pressure so sharp it made him set the pen down and reread the document twice. He was 19. He didn't know what to do with the signal yet. He signed. He filed it away. He inherited the certification, the gate permit history, and $47 million in his mother's accumulated medical debt. A figure that had been climbing for 4 years across 3 hospitals, 2 specialist programs, and 1 ventilator that billed $900 every single day without pause. He registered as a hunter 6 weeks after his father's death. Not because he had options. Because the certification was already paid for and the gate assignments were already familiar and the math, even the wrong version of it, was better than nothing. His gate desk officer was a B-rank named Cho Dae-jun. Cho had been processing F-rank permits for 11 years. He had developed, over that time, a specific expression for F-rank hunters who showed up weekly with insect gate requests. A look of theatrical pity so practiced it had become reflexive, deployed with the same automatic precision as the rubber stamp he used to approve the paperwork. He used it on Kale every week without variation. Sometimes he added commentary. Still at it. Or, back again. Never a question. Never a conversation. Just the stamp, the expression, and the implicit confirmation that Cho had already assessed Kale's ceiling and found it exactly where it was. Kale took his permits and left. Every week. For 2 years. His average weekly earnings from insect gate clearing, $84. His mother's weekly ventilator cost, $6,300. The gap between those 2 numbers was not a problem he could solve by working harder inside the existing structure. He understood this. He had understood it since month 3. He kept clearing gates anyway because stopping meant the certification lapsed, and the certification was the only asset his father had left him that hadn't already been consumed by the debt. 2 years in, his career total earnings, $8,736. His mother's remaining debt, $46,991,264. On a Tuesday morning in the 3rd week of his 25th month of active registration, Kale arrived at the F-rank assignment desk 40 minutes before his gate slot opened. The B and C-rank hunters were getting priority processing ahead of him, standard procedure, standard wait. He sat in the holding area, pulled up the Hunter Association's digital archive on his phone, and opened the founding charter. Not because he had a plan, because Debt Sense had been producing a low, persistent pressure in his chest for 11 days. Ever since he'd signed the latest renewal on his gate permit block, and the signal wasn't stopping. He started reading. Page 1 through 200, large monster classification tables, S-rank gate protocols, Essence Stone grading criteria. Page 201 through 500, payment tier structures for B-rank and above, guild compensation frameworks, death benefit calculations. Page 501 through 700, gate ranking methodology, association liability clauses, hunter employment law cross-references. Page 701 through 847, administrative procedure, certification requirements, renewal frameworks. Page 848. The pressure in his chest became a burn. 1 sentence. Buried under 6 cross-reference footnotes in a subsection titled Miscellaneous Arthropod Classification Addendum, written in legal Korean dense enough that the association's own summary documents had reduced it to the phrase, standard kill rate applies. 1 payment unit per confirmed kill, monster type, arthropod, no minimum size classification required, colony type groupings assessed as individual entity kills per registered system confirmation, no size floor, no colony exclusion. Every ant in a gate was a registered arthropod. Every registered arthropod was a confirmed kill. Every confirmed kill was 1 cent. Kale sat very still for a long moment. Then he pulled up the municipal gate survey database, the boring public record that tracked biological content assessments for every registered gate in the district, used primarily by pest control contractors and environmental assessors and essentially nobody else. He cross-referenced insect gate IDs against colony size estimates. Standard F-rank insect gate, residential classification, Minimum 847,000 individual workers per colony at baseline assessment. Industrial District Gate, surveyed 14 months prior. 3 interconnected colonies. Combined worker estimate 4,300,000. He opened his calculator. 4,300,000 multiplied by 1 cent. $43,000. From one gate, in one afternoon. He had been clearing these gates for 2 years and earning $12 per run. His name was called for his gate slot. He stood up, pocketed his phone, and walked to the desk. Cho stamped his permit with the expression. Kale took the paperwork. He booked 11 gates for the following morning before he reached the parking structure. He said nothing to anyone. Debt sense had burned on 2 documents in his life with this intensity. His father's compensation paperwork 3 years ago and the clause he had just finished reading. He had been right about the first one. He was going to find out about the second. 11 gates. That was the number Kale had booked before he reached the parking structure. Not 1. Not 2, a cautious test, a maybe, a hedge against being wrong. 11. Because debt sense had never misfired in his life, and the founding charter was burning in his chest with the same frequency as his father's compensation paperwork, and he had done the math 3 times on the drive home and gotten the same answer every time. But math on a phone calculator and math inside a legal system are 2 different problems. He spent the next 3 days not clearing gates. He spent them reading the founding charter in full, not the association's summary document, not the condensed version distributed to registered hunters during orientation, not the FAQ page on the official portal that reduced 900 pages of binding legal text into 12 bullet points nobody scrolled past the third. The full document. Every page. Every footnote. Every cross-reference that led to another subsection that led to another addendum that led back to page 848. He needed to know 3 things before Gate 1. Whether the clause was genuinely unpatched. Whether his certification gave him the access it needed to give him. And whether there was a financial ceiling somewhere in the payment structure that would cap the exploit before it reached the number he had calculated. The answer to all 3 was the same. The clause was unpatched because insect gates had never generated enough hunter traffic to justify a review. The association's legal team operated on a triage system. High revenue clauses got audited annually, mid-revenue clauses got reviewed every 3 years, and low revenue classifications got filed and forgotten. Arthropod kill rates fell into the lowest possible revenue category. No essence stone value. No material yield. No guild interest. The clause had been sitting on page 848 since the charter's ratification. Untouched, because touching it would have required someone to first notice it existed. The certification gave him everything he needed. His father's biological hazard clearance covered all arthropod gate classifications, all sizes, all district designations within the Seoul metropolitan zone. It was renewable annually, transferable to direct family inheritors under Hunter Employment Law subsection 14c. And this was the detail that had kept the $28,000 certification wall intact for 7 years, non-purchasable by any hunter who hadn't completed the 400-hour field training program that accompanied original certification. There was no shortcut, no guild sponsorship pathway, no association waiver process. You either inherited it or you spent 2 years and $28,000 earning it from scratch. Kale had inherited it. Every other hunter who had ever stumbled close to this calculation, and the municipal survey data suggested at least 3 had, based on gate booking patterns that spiked briefly around insect classifications before dropping back to 0, had hit the certification wall and stopped. Not because they were incapable, because $28,000 is an impossible barrier for an F-rank hunter earning $12 per gate run. The payment ceiling question took him the longest to resolve. He went through the charter's payment structure clause by clause, cross-referencing against the association's financial processing guidelines and the Hunter Employment Law framework that governed dispute resolution. What he found was not a ceiling. It was the opposite. The payment system had been designed for S-rank gate economics, built to handle million-dollar transactions, high-volume essence stone valuations, guild-scale payouts. The arthropod clause fed into the same processing infrastructure. There was no volume cap, no daily limit, no anomaly threshold that would automatically halt payments before they processed. The automated financial review system flagged accounts for human audit when quarterly earnings exceeded $500,000. But the flag triggered a review, not a freeze. A freeze required a separate compliance action with mandatory 72-hour advance notice to the hunter. He wrote that down. Specifically, the 72-hour notice requirement. Debt sense had produced a faint pressure when he read that subsection, not the furnace intensity of page 848, but a low warmth that meant the clause was load-bearing somewhere down the line. He filed it and kept reading. By the end of day 3, he had a 4-page document on his phone. Not notes, a legal map. Every clause that touched the exploit, every subsection that cross-referenced it, every procedural requirement the association would need to follow if they tried to shut it down mid-operation. He knew the charter better than the compliance officers who administered it. He knew it better than the lawyers who had summarized it. He knew it the way debt sense made him know things, not through analysis alone but through the specific physical understanding that comes from a body that registers legal weight as sensation. He also knew something else. Something the 3 days of reading had confirmed in a way the initial calculation hadn't fully shown. The window was not permanent. The moment his earnings crossed the $500,000 quarterly threshold, the automated flag would fire and a human reviewer would pull his file. That reviewer would read his gate logs. They would see an F-rank hunter clearing insect gates at a volume that had no precedent in the association's history. They would look at the payment totals. And at that point, depending on how fast they moved, how well they understood what they were looking at, and whether anyone in the legal chain recognized the 72-hour notice requirement before issuing a freeze, the window would either close legally or close procedurally. He had one shot at maximum volume before the system caught up. So he did what the outline of the exploit demanded and what every instinct from 2 years of F-rank survival confirmed. He moved before he was ready, because ready was a condition the debt clock didn't have the patience to wait for. Gate 1 was booked for 7 a.m. He arrived at 6:40. The gate building's F-rank registration desk didn't open until 7:30, which meant Cho Dae-jun wasn't there yet, which meant nobody stamped his permit with theatrical pity and nobody made a comment about overtime. He checked in through the automated kiosk, suited up in the equipment bay, and stood outside the gate entrance for 90 seconds doing the only preparation that mattered. He ran the math one final time. Standard residential insect gate, Colonial Survey estimate 847,000 workers at baseline. At 1 cent per confirmed kill, baseline payout, $8,470. At the industrial gate estimate of $4,300,000, $43,000. He had booked a mix, 6 residential classifications, 4 mid-range, 1 industrial. Conservative combined estimate across all 11, $180,000 to $290,000. If the math was right, he stepped through the gate. The interior was what insect gates always were, a compressed tunnel system carved out of packed earth and biological secretion, walls slightly damp, air carrying the specific smell of colony density that never translated well in gate survey descriptions but hit immediately in person. Kale had cleared hundreds of these. The smell was familiar. The scale was not. His smoke dispenser activated on entry, a modified agricultural unit he'd sourced 3 months prior for pest control contract work, not combat. Standard hunter gear wasn't designed for insect gate volume. He'd figured that out in month 4 of his registration and adapted accordingly, the way F-ranks adapt to everything, by finding the non-combat solution that accomplished what the combat equipment couldn't. The smoke hit the tunnel system. Worker ants responded exactly as the agricultural research papers described: mass movement, agitation, surface exposure. The system registration fired immediately. Kill confirmed times 47, kill confirmed times 180, kill confirmed times 390. He kept moving, methodical, radial pattern outward from the estimated queen chamber location, smoke dispenser cycling, boots steady on the tunnel floor. The kill confirmation stacked with a rhythm he hadn't experienced in 2 years of clearing these gates, because 2 years of clearing these gates, he'd been eliminating dozens per run, not hundreds per minute. Kill confirmed times 800, kill confirmed times 400, 38 minutes. The gate interior cleared. He stepped back through the entrance. Gate clear, confirmed, total kills, 1,247,000, payment processing, $12,470. He stood in the equipment bay and looked at the notification for a long time. Not because the number surprised him, he had calculated it, he had trusted the calculation, debt sense had confirmed the clause. He looked at it because $12,470 was more than he had earned in the previous 6 weeks combined. Because it had taken 38 minutes. Because there were 10 more gates booked for tomorrow and the day after, and the system had processed the payment without flagging anything, and the 72-hour notice requirement was sitting in his legal map document, and he knew exactly what it meant. He texted his mother's hospital billing coordinator. First time in 4 months he'd had anything to say to her that wasn't a payment deferral request. Send me the updated total. He booked 3 additional gates for the following afternoon before he left the building. 14 total now. He still hadn't told anyone. Back at the F-rank desk, Cho Dae-jun arrived for his shift 30 minutes after Kale had already left and processed the gate completion form that had come through on the automated system. He looked at the kill count, 1,247,000, and the processing payment, $12,470, and assumed, with the confidence of someone who had spent 11 years processing F-rank paperwork, that it was a system entry error. He flagged it for routine correction and moved on to the next file. He did not correct it. because it wasn't an error. Nobody told him that either. 14 gates. That was the number by end of day 1. Then 19 by end of day 2 because the first gate had processed without friction and the second had processed without friction and the third had processed without friction, and at some point during the fourth Kale stopped checking the payment notifications after each run and started checking them in batches, the way you stop checking the temperature when you already know it's getting hotter. The system had no opinion about this. It just paid. Gates 2 through 7 ran on the same model as Gate 1, smoke dispenser, radial pattern, 38 to 44 minutes per clear, kill counts between 900,000 and 1,400,000 depending on colony density. The variables that mattered weren't the ones Kale could control. They were the ones the municipal survey data had already told him about. Baseline colony population, tunnel system depth, whether the gate had been cleared recently enough that the colony had partially rebuilt, or left long enough that it had reached maximum density. He started cross-referencing booking availability against survey timestamps. Gates cleared within the last 30 days. Partial colony, lower yield, skip if alternatives existed. Gates untouched for 60 days or more. Full density, maximum worker population, priority booking. He built a selection system in a notes document on his phone, ranked every available insect gate in the district by survey age and estimated yield, and booked in order of priority rather than proximity. This cost him 40 minutes of planning per day. It added an average of 340,000 kills per gate. By end of day 4, he had cleared gates 1 through 11. Total kills across all 11, 12,847,000. Total payment received, $128,470. His system wallet had not held a number above 4 digits in 2 years of active registration. He paid 3 months of ventilator costs in a single transaction. First time since his father died that the hospital billing coordinator had called him about something other than a late payment. But the numbers that mattered most weren't in his wallet. They were in the pattern he was watching develop across the gates. Gate 8 was where it changed. Gates 1 through 7 had run clean. Worker ants responded to the smoke, surface exposed, system registered, eliminated in sequence. The colonies had behaved exactly as the agricultural research described. Mass movement on chemical stimulus, predictable exposure, no coordinated defensive response. Kale had begun to develop a rhythm. Entry, dispenser activation, radial sweep, exit. 38 minutes average. Clean. Gate 8 was a mid-range classification. Survey age 71 days. Estimated worker population 1,800,000. He entered on the standard model. The smoke hit the tunnel system. Nothing moved. Not nothing, the kill confirmations were still firing, workers still dying in the immediate vicinity of the dispenser. But the deeper tunnel network, where the bulk of the colony lived, had gone still in a way that didn't match any agricultural behavioral model he had read. No mass movement. No surface exposure. The workers that were dying because they were already in the entry corridor, not because the colony had responded to the stimulus. He pushed deeper into the tunnel system. The sound reached him before the visual did. A low vibration in the packed earth walls, not the clicking of worker movement but something with more mass behind it. Heavier, slower, coming from multiple directions simultaneously. Military caste. He had read about them in the gate survey literature without fully registering what the description meant in practice. Soldier ants, arthropod classification, threat level assessment, moderate to high, biological hazard notation, acid spray, chitinous armor, coordinated response behavior. The surveys noted their presence in colonies that had reached full maturity without recent disruption. Exactly the profile of a gate untouched for 71 days. What the surveys didn't communicate, because surveys were written by environmental assessors who observed from safe distances rather than hunters who stood in the tunnels, was the specific quality of the sound they made when the hive intelligence decided a threat had crossed the threshold from ignorable to actionable. Kale found out what that quality was at Gate 8. They came from 3 directions. Fist-sized, chitinous plating across the thorax and head segment, mandibles built for shearing rather than gripping, a different instrument entirely from the worker mandibles he had been observing for 2 years. The acid spray came first, a fine mist that hit his left forearm before he processed what was happening. Standard F-rank gear dissolved on contact. The sleeve of his jacket went in 11 seconds. The skin beneath it went red, then blistered, in the time it took him to back against the tunnel wall and trigger the emergency smoke burst from his secondary canister. The burst bought him 40 seconds. He used 38 of them to get back to the gate entrance. He exited with 847,000 confirmed kills, just the entry corridor workers, none of the deeper colony, dissolved gear on his left arm, chemical burns across the forearm that would need treatment he couldn't afford from a licensed medical provider, and a payment of $8,470 against a supply replacement cost of $6,200. Net, $2,270. He sat in the equipment bay for 20 minutes, not processing the loss, processing what the military cast response told him about the gates ahead. Gate 8 had activated soldier response at the 11-minute mark. That meant the Hive intelligence had a threat assessment window, a period between entry and full defensive mobilization during which the colony evaluated whether the intruder represented a colony-level threat. Below the threshold, workers died and soldiers stayed dormant. Above the threshold, the soldiers mobilized and the gate became a different problem entirely. The question was what determined the threshold. He went back to the survey literature that night. Not the standard classification documents, the biological research papers that the survey data cited as source material, dense academic work on ant colony defense mechanics that had nothing to do with hunter operations and everything to do with what he needed to know. He read for 6 hours. The military cast threshold was not triggered by kill count alone. It was triggered by kill rate relative to colony mass, how fast the colony was losing workers as a percentage of total population. A slow, low-volume clear fell below the threshold indefinitely. A fast, high-volume clear crossed it within minutes. Kale's method, smoke dispenser, mass exposure, rapid kill stacking, was the most efficient possible way to trigger maximum military response in minimum time. He had been optimizing for the wrong variable. The correction took him 2 days to engineer. Not a different approach to the smoke. The smoke was still necessary for mass worker exposure. A different entry geometry. If he moved through the tunnel system in a specific radial pattern that kept his kill rate below 40,000 per minute for the first 18 minutes, the Hive intelligence would not register a colony-level threat. The soldier cast would stay dormant. At the 18-minute mark, with the outer worker rings cleared and the colony's defensive communication network disrupted, he could push the rate to maximum without triggering a coordinated response, because the network that would have carried the mobilization signal would already be compromised. He tested it on Gate 9. Entry. Slow pattern. Kill rate held deliberately below threshold for 18 minutes. The tunnel walls stayed quiet. At minute 19, he pushed to maximum dispenser output. Kill confirmed times 2. 100. Kill confirmed times 4. 800. Kill confirmed times 7. 300. No soldier response. The Hive intelligence had lost its coordination window. He exited Gate 9 at the 41-minute mark. Gate clear. Confirmed. Total kills. 2,100,000. Payment processing. $21,000. Supply cost for Gate 9. $4,200. Net after replacement. $16,800. From one gate, with military cast present and dormant. He stood in the equipment bay and did not celebrate. He updated his gate selection document to flag every gate with a survey age above 60 days as requiring the slow entry protocol, added a timing column to track the 18-minute threshold window, and booked 6 additional gates for the following 2 days. His left forearm was still blistered from Gate 8. He dressed it with supplies from a non-licensed vendor, a pest control equipment wholesaler he had used for 2 years for smoke dispenser components, because licensed hunter medical providers billed at rates structured for hunters with guild health plans, and Kale did not have a guild health plan. The treatment worked well enough. It would scar. He noted that in the same document as the gate selection data and kept moving. By end of the 2nd week, his operational rhythm had locked. Morning. Review survey data. Confirm gate selection. Update timing document. Gate 1 of the day. Slow entry protocol. 18-minute threshold window. Maximum output phase. Exit. Brief equipment check and resupply from the wholesaler kit in his car. Gate 2. Equipment check. Gate 3 if the burn schedule allowed it. He was clearing 3 gates per day on good days. 2 on days when the chemical exposure had been heavy enough to slow his movement speed in the tunnels. 1 on Gate 8 recovery days, when the arm required attention before he could suit up. End of week 2. Cumulative kill count. 31,400,000. Total earnings. $314,000. Mother's ventilator paid forward 14 months. Medical debt remaining. $46,720,000. The number was still enormous. The direction it was moving in was not. At the F-rank registration desk, Cho Dae-jun had processed Kale's gate completion forms every day for 2 weeks without raising a flag. The completion forms listed gate ID, clear time, kill count, and payment processed, standard fields, automated submission. Cho reviewed them the way he reviewed all F-rank completion forms, with the specific quality of attention that comes from 11 years of processing paperwork that has never once contained a surprise. On day 14, he processed a form showing a single gate kill count of 2,100,000 and a payment of $21,000. He looked at it for 3 seconds longer than usual. Then he looked at the cumulative total the system had begun displaying on high-volume accounts, $314,000 across 21 gates in 14 days. He picked up his desk phone, put it down, picked it up again. He called the association's financial review department and described what he was seeing. The automated quarterly flag threshold was $500,000. Kale was at $314,000. The financial review officer told Cho that the account would flag automatically at threshold and that no manual intervention was required before that point. Standard procedure. Cho put the phone down. He stamped the next form with the expression, "Then the next. Then the next." Kale was already in gate 22 when the call happened. He didn't know about it. Debt sense wasn't calibrated for phone conversations. But the low warmth from the 72-hour notice clause was still there. Persistent, patient, waiting for the moment it would become relevant. It was getting closer. Gate 22 was where the colonies stopped being predictable. Not Gate 8. Gate 8 had been a surprise. A single colony that had reached full military maturity and responded the way the biological literature said fully mature colonies responded. Kale had studied that, engineered around it, and moved on. Gate 9 through Gate 21 had run on the slow entry protocol without a single soldier response. 18 minutes below threshold, push to maximum, exit clean. The method worked because the method was built on sound biological mechanics. What happened at Gate 22 was different. The gate was a mid-range classification, survey age 58 days, just below the 60-day threshold he had flagged for mandatory slow entry protocol. He ran standard entry, smoke dispenser, moderate pace, kill rate building normally through the first 8 minutes. The soldiers came at minute 9, not from one direction, from 4 simultaneously, a coordinated entry from the tunnel branches that surrounded the central corridor, cutting off the radial pattern before it could reach the outer worker rings. The military caste had not waited for a threat assessment window. The moment his kill rate crossed 12,000 per minute, well below the 40,000 threshold that Gate 8's literature had established, the mobilization signal fired. He got out, barely. Left forearm took 2 acid bursts on the exit run, the second one hitting the scar tissue from Gate 8 and producing a pain quality that was categorically different from new skin damage. He stripped the dissolved gear in the equipment bay, treated the burns with the wholesaler kit, and sat very still for a long time. Then he pulled out his notes document and looked at the threshold data from Gate 8. The 40,000 per minute figure had come from one colony, one survey, one behavioral profile. He had been applying it as a universal rule because one data point was the only data point he had, and one data point had been enough to engineer Gate 9 through Gate 21 without incident. Gate 22 had a different colony profile. Smaller total population. The 58-day survey estimated 1,200,000 workers versus Gate 8's 1,800,000. The military caste threshold, he now understood, was not an absolute kill rate. It was a kill rate relative to total colony population. Gate 8's colony could absorb 40,000 worker deaths per minute before registering a colony-level threat because it had 1,800,000 workers to absorb from. Gate 22's colony hit the threshold at 12,000 per minute because 12,000 represented a higher percentage of its smaller population. The threshold was a ratio, not a number. He recalculated every gate on his booking list that night, not by survey age, by estimated population density relative to tunnel system volume, a figure he could approximate from the survey data's tunnel mapping coordinates if he cross-referenced against the biological literature's colony density tables. Took 4 hours. He updated every entry in his selection document with a revised threshold figure and a corresponding slow entry pace. Gate 22's revised threshold, 8,500 kills per minute maximum for the first 22 minutes. He went back to Gate 22 the following morning on the corrected protocol. It worked. 1,100,000 confirmed kills. $11,000. Military caste dormant throughout. But the correction had revealed something the first 9 days of operation hadn't shown him. The slow entry protocol was not a fixed solution. It was a variable one. Every gate had a different threshold. Every gate required its own calculation. And the calculation required survey data precise enough to estimate population density. Data that existed for most gates but not all, because the municipal survey program had coverage gaps in the industrial district's older gate clusters. 3 gates on his booking list had no usable survey data. For those 3, he had 2 options. Skip them and leave volume on the table. Or enter blind, run the slowest possible entry pace, conservative enough to stay below any plausible threshold, and accept the yield reduction that came with it. He entered all 3 blind. Gate 24. No survey data, ultra-conservative protocol, 22 minutes at 6,000 kills per minute maximum. Total kills, 680,000. Payment, $6,800. Military caste, dormant. Supply cost, $3,100. Net, $3,700. It was the lowest yield gate of the entire operation. It was also confirmation that the blind protocol worked, that even without population data, a conservative enough entry pace could keep the threshold unbroken. He noted the net figure, updated the document, and booked gate 25. The physical toll through this period was accumulating in ways his initial supply budget hadn't accounted for. The left forearm burns from gates 8 and 22 had not healed cleanly. Scar tissue from gate 8 had been re-damaged at gate 22, and the layering of acid damage on previously compromised skin was producing a tightness in his grip that reduced his dispenser control precision by a margin he could feel but not quantify. He adapted by switching the dispenser to his right hand and using his left only for tunnel wall navigation, a change that cost him approximately 4 minutes per gate in repositioning time and reduced his radial sweep accuracy in the tighter tunnel sections. He also stopped sleeping more than 4 hours per night around gate 20. Not by choice. The burn sites were producing enough discomfort at rest to make sustained sleep unreliable, and 4 hours was what he could get before the combination of pain and debt clock arithmetic pulled him back to the notes document. He ate once per day. Not rationing calculation. Every meal above the functional minimum was supply budget he couldn't recover if a gate ran over on gear costs. He had set a daily food expenditure ceiling of 8,001 and held it without exception. This was not sustainable as a long-term operating condition. He knew that. He had known it since gate 8. Sustainability was not the variable he was optimizing for. Volume and speed were, because the $500,000 quarterly flag was a fixed point on the timeline and every gate cleared before it fired was a gate cleared at full payment rate. By gate 28, cumulative earnings had reached $2,100,000. He paid 6 months of ventilator costs, updated his mother's hospital file to reflect the new payment status, did not tell her where the money was coming from,